Hello and welcome to this short informative video to try and address some of the things we should consider if you're thinking of voting in the upcoming snap election. Elections will be taking place on June the 8th. You have till May the 22nd in order to register to vote. In this country we have a system that doesn't recognise that every vote counts. And until that's changed, you have a choice of two parties: Conservative Party, or the Tories as they're known. You have the Labour Party, which is going through a massive transformation. This video is aimed at trying to ensure that you are at least better equipped when making your choice out of those two parties. In terms of the Conservative Party, they have been in power now for the last 7 years. Therefore, it's beneficial for us to recognise that we can look at what they've done. So you can see what policies have been forwarded, what changes have happened to you and the communities around you, and therefore make a decision on whether or not you want to have more of that. You can then look at the Labour Party and see all of the things that they are offering and decide whether or not you actually believe that they want to do those things. Regardless of whichever MP or politician you are looking at, my first bit of advice is to always consider that they have a voting record. And if you agree, if you can look at this politician and think to yourself, if it was me making this decision, how would I have voted? That will tell you whether or not you are aligned with their way of thinking. Comparing the two homes of these two politicians, you can clearly see that whilst Jeremy Corbyn has reportedly come from a well-off background, that hasn't necessarily transferred into his ambitions, because we don't see him living in a huge luxury home. Another thing to consider as well, again when looking at any politician, is their expenses. Some politicians have been claiming hundreds of thousands of pounds. At one point, Jeremy Corbyn had the lowest expense claims in the whole of the government. Brexit is one of the things that everyone is concerned about. This is a massive change for our country. Quite rightly so, there are huge questions. Regardless of who's in power at the time, it's going to be a complicated process. So when you raise questions about how well it's been going, the fact that Theresa May has already started to begin to make accusations against EU leaders for treating her badly and she's being left out of meetings, it does raise questions about how she's sort of alienated herself already. More importantly for me and for many others, there's questions about whose priorities will be looked after. A United Nations report highlighted the grotesque treatment of vulnerable people in this country by the Conservatives. Throw into the mix that fox hunting is now being championed, and you have to question whether or not people that view it as okay to chase after a small animal, watch it get ripped apart by dogs, does make me concerned about whether or not they'll go into these negotiations prioritising the needs of many people that they potentially don't see as important. Since Brexit, wealthy people in this country have reportedly increased their wealth, while already we're seeing the idea that for the rest of us this is going to be a tough time ahead. Well, both leaders are travelling up and down the country at the moment trying to gain support. Theresa May is going to small meetings with invite-only guests where she knows what questions will be asked to her. Jeremy Corbyn is out meeting the public to huge crowds of support and obviously engaging with the public. Theresa May is refusing to debate Jeremy Corbyn. If you've got Theresa May on film where she knows what to say and she's got a script, then she can put on a very good act of appearing like a strong leader. However, if she's unwilling to meet the public, and when she does, is often met with questions that she can't answer, or in interviews has questions that she can't answer and she evades. This doesn't say to me that she's a strong leader, it just tells me that she's been able to convince many people that she's a strong leader.
Did you know that misfire had occurred?
Well, I have absolute faith in our Trident missile.
Did you know that it had happened?
I think we should defend our country.
This is a very serious incident. Did you know about it when you told the House of Commons?
And the issue that we were talking about in the House of Commons was a very serious issue.
Prime Minister, did you know?
There are tests that take place all the time.
Jeremy Corbyn, on the other hand, has been attacked by some of the most strongest and powerful institutions in this country. They have all wanted you to think that he's a weak leader, and you have to question why. During that time, he has continued to make the Tories do U-turns on their policies, or has been involved in making the Tories U-turn on their policies. He's also came through 2 leadership elections with a huge increase in popularity, and now has attracted more people to the party than ever. There are your strong leaders to discuss and debate. However, it won't be a public debate because Theresa May refuses. I mentioned Brexit. Immigration is one of the issues that many people are concerned about. The Labour Party have made it quite clear that they are pro-immigration. They like to point out that immigrants come to this country mainly and want to find work, so therefore they are paying taxes, they are working in industries such as the NHS. We can't say that all immigration doesn't need some sort of scrutiny, of course it does. But again, we can judge the Conservatives on their record, and they have set immigration targets and they have continually missed these immigration targets. On the one hand, you've got someone saying that they support immigration but will look at it, and on the other hand, you have another party who are saying that they will set targets but they will miss them. There is a lack of retention, of holding on to teachers within education, and also a lack of recruitment. Over the last few years, we've not seen teachers being attracted into education. As well as that, there are huge pressures across the board, which means that there is low morale in colleges and in schools. And so we turn not to the politicians to get an idea about this, but potentially the people that are there on the ground. The person running the NHS, Jeremy Hunt, co-authored a book in which he talks about privatisation and how we should privatise the NHS. You've got doctors coming out categorically telling you not to vote for the Conservative Party. You've got nurses planning strikes, doctors already going on strike. This tells you all you really need to know about the state of the NHS and where it will be if we continue to have a party that has done so much damage to it already.
So the loss of the nurse bursary means that there's fewer nurses applying to go into nursing in the future. The high cost of medical courses at university all means that you deter people from doing that. Bring our NHS back to us. Publicly run, publicly financed, publicly employed National Health Service.
Some of the criticisms aimed at Jeremy Corbyn are as follows: that he is a terrorist sympathiser. I definitely agree that I think some of his wording when describing how he feels we should proceed with certain factions such as the IRA has upset people. However, if you can see beyond the language used, what he was clearly trying to do was move towards diplomacy. There is a view that the actions of our governments has always been to use military intervention first, which have seen destruction and caused a lot of death and misery, often to targets aimed, but many civilians have been killed in the process. And so this kind of attitude to sort of attack first, ask questions later, is questionable. In Northern Ireland, one of the criticisms levelled at Jeremy Corbyn, diplomacy for a big measure seems to have worked. If there is criticism being made about the people that he sort of spoke to or wanted to speak to during that time, it has to be remembered that IRA operatives were also met by the Queen, were also met by Margaret Thatcher and Theresa May, and we don't really see much criticism of their terrorist sympathies. According to David Cameron, we're all terrorist sympathisers if we don't agree with continuing airstrikes. I'd also like to highlight the close relationship that Britain and Theresa May has with Saudi Arabia, which raises many questions about whether or not we feel that these are our friends and whether or not we should look at these relationships more closely as well.
As a former British soldier who served in Afghanistan and lost friends there and in Iraq, I support Jeremy Corbyn's opposition to the wars. I trust Jeremy to keep us safe.
Let's consider then that there is an open letter that has been written by military chiefs to the Tory government criticising their lack of investment. Cybersecurity is another thing that has to be considered nowadays, obviously with the recent attacks. Because of lack of funding on the part of the Conservatives, there is questions about defence there. Environmentally, we should all be concerned about the state of the planet and what it means for us and our health. A strong economy is something that we're always told is important.
Public services when you have the strong and stable leadership that delivers a strong economy. And every vote for me will be a vote for a strong and stable leadership, for a strong and stable government. Every vote for me is a vote for a strong economy. Every vote for me is a vote for strong and stable leadership. leadership of the Conservatives. But you only get that with a strong economy, and that's only possible with a strong and stable.
Who is the economy strong for? When we're seeing the fact that police stations and fire stations and hospitals are all under severe pressure and closing, that libraries in your local community centres are closing, but at the same time, the richest people in this country and the wealthiest people in this country are increasing their wealth, whilst your wages and my wages are not increasing, and while we're seeing a dip actually in real terms of wages, who is the economy strong for? When our taxes, despite Conservative promises that they won't go up, have gone up, and corporation tax for the biggest, most wealthiest corporations in the world, their taxes are going down and are set to continue to go down, who is the economy working for? We've got homelessness increasing. We've got poverty for children increasing. These, to me, aren't the indications that an economy is strong. Labour's policies, the manifesto, is proving massively popular. When we've had austerity for so many years, it's actually refreshing to have a Parliament party turn around and say, this is what we want to do. The Conservative government have borrowed huge sums of money since they have been in power, taking our national debt to almost £2 trillion. Labour are saying that they also will borrow huge amounts of money. You have a choice. On the one hand, a government that continues to borrow but decimates public services, or a government that says it will borrow but will invest so that services such as the NHS and education actually do well. You're spending on one hand but gaining on the other.
So we will ensure there is a £10 an hour living wage for everybody in this country.
They've thrown costing in there, they've shown how they will do it, and it's attracting a lot of support. So don't be swayed by saying, oh, we've always been told that we can't do these things, we've been told there's not enough money. Who is telling you that you can't do these things? Who is telling you that there isn't enough money? Why wouldn't we want things such as more bank holidays when other countries have more bank holidays than us? Why can't we have £10 an hour as a minimum wage when you've got rich CEOs and people making an absolute fortune? Who is coming out in support of Labour and its manifesto and their policies? You've got celebrities to academics, people who are valued as some of the most forward-thinking intellects in our country or in the world are saying that they would vote for Corbyn. Who is supporting the Conservative Party? A rich list came out recently which highlighted of all the wealthiest people in this country, the vast majority of them have given money to the Conservative Party. These are directly the people that will be affected by the Labour Party. I'd like to mention the effect of media bias that we see in this country. A democratic country has to have a fair and impartial service. When you've got the vast majority of our press media owned by billionaires who have ties to the Conservative Party, then obviously we're not getting the full picture. There has been numerous investigations into the heavy bias reported, and all of these show that they are having the truth distorted. They want you to see someone as strong despite the fact that they're avoiding public appearances, or wanting you to trivialise these things so that you pay more attention to the gimmicks being portrayed by someone like Boris Johnson when you're not actually listening to the policies being said by Jeremy Corbyn. Then there are massive questions about the integrity of our media services. The BBC is implicit in this because we pay for the BBC. I can ignore watching Sky News and reading the Daily Mail or the Sun or the Times, but I have to pay for the BBC. This is shameful if the BBC is not providing an impartial service. But there are very big questions about its impartiality. Key figures in the BBC, very strong ties to the Conservative Party. The Board of Governors is selected majoritively by the Tory party and therefore dictating the content of the BBC. Luckily and thankfully, because of the proliferation of social media and the internet, we now have the opportunity to question these things. It's arguably one of the reasons why younger voters are drawn to Labour, because they don't rely on the traditional ways of getting news and hearing from media sources. So thank you very much for listening to my views on these matters. I apologise if I haven't been able to address every issue that people find important. I welcome any views, criticisms and discussions.
Do you accept inequality and injustice in society? Do you accept that people are homeless? Do you accept the massive gap between the richest and the poorest? Or do you do something about it?